I'm here to listen. Why am I walking on this way?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Muse's AT Podcast, where you can relive my epic journey with me. This is Muse, and what follows is my Appalachian Trail story. Today's episode covers Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. And the content of this episode is going to take us out of the 100. We're going to leave the 100 and have a bit of a respite at Shaw's Hiker Hostel in Monson, Maine. And as you guys may remember, this is also the stretch where Haley is going to leave the trail. She will ultimately leave the trail from Monson. So whenever I get back on trail on the other side of Monson, it is going to be a solo journey. Before we dive into it, I've got an announcement. I've also got a couple of things that I want to do here in the intro. I'm going to start using the intro to give really the post-trail updates. And I've got a bunch of them to go through today. But first, that announcement. I am actually going to, at this juncture, at the end of this week, so we're going to finish out this week, and then I'm going to put the podcast on a bit of a hiatus. And here is why that's going to be happening. When I launched at the beginning of May, I would say in some ways I wasn't quite ready. Now, this has been absolutely awesome, and I have been learning a ton, and so I do intend to come back, and hopefully this is the only time I'm going to have to do something like this. But I need to regroup and get some stuff together, get some processes refined so that we can hit it from there on out. I do think the 3 episode a week pace is the right pace to get the story told, because as you guys are already experiencing, the story takes a while to tell in daily journal entries. So again, hopefully this is the only time I'm going to have to do this. We'll find out. To try and ensure that it's the only time, I'm going to go ahead and take a full month. Now, during that month, I'm not going to leave you with nothing. What I will do is I will play some stuff from the back catalog. We've already got a decent back catalog because of this early sprint here. We'll have 24 episodes by the end of this week. So over the next month, you should hear about half of those again. We will be back on the air with new content again after this Friday. We're going to finish out this week, but then we will be back on the air with new content on Monday, July 27th. Okay, so that's that. Talk to you again soon. Hopefully the month won't seem too long. Now, a couple of, I guess I'm going to start this with the mentions, because there were a couple of mentions that I want to give shout out to and shine a spotlight on, I suppose. First was back in episode 18. It already seems like it's a little while ago, but this is going to be the interview with Margot Polo. And she mentioned a really fast Canadian who zipped into and out of her story very, very quickly. He was pretty quick in my story as well, although he and I both, I believe, zeroed, although I can try to find out if he zeroed. I certainly zeroed at the Barn Hostel in Gorham, New Hampshire. And so that really fast Canadian was Moose Hog. So shout out to Moose Hog. Moose Hog was a cool guy. I got that update from Bounce a little while ago, so Bounce, thank you for calling that out. That was awesome. He texted me over the weekend with that information, and it's cool that Bounce and I are talking, relatively regularly here, and the podcast is giving a forum for discussion, I suppose. Bounce and Moose Hog would ultimately finish together with a few other folks on November 16th, and I know that because Bounce sent me his summit pictures from Springer Mountain, which was totally awesome. Actually, I can even anchor that in my mind. It was the Sunday I got back on trail after Erwin, Tennessee. And you guys remember what was going on in Erwin, Tennessee. So for me to get back on trail and get that message, I was super pumped up when I got that message, because I was like, man, I'm back and I'm ready to go. I'm going to the end now. And after congratulating Bounce, what I got back from him was, thanks, brother, your turn, which, awesome. That was it. I was going to the end. And then, as you know, I met the Slowbows and everything, and it ended up just being an awesome hike from there on out. The other mention that I want to throw out there is Sir Stops-A-Lot, because Sir Stops-A-Lot came up just last episode. Hippie Chick mentioned Sir Stops-A-Lot coming around Shaw's and doing hiker feeds, which is basically trail magic. And that, in a way, is a hearkening back to episode 8. So we're going back a little ways here, the Trail Days episode. Later in that episode, almost at the very end of the episode, I ran into a guy that I met last year on trail, Walmart. And Walmart and I were at one of Sir Stops-A-Lot's hiker feeds. This was at the Catamount Inn in Bennington, Vermont. This would be one stop where I did not zero. I just stayed there that night, but that was an awesome night. It was a lot of fun. I remember hanging out with those guys for a while. Sir Stops a Lot, Walmart, and a couple of other folks. Shotgun was there too. And we hung out for a while. Then we had that awesome Sunday right after when he joined me at church. And then we went to the diner afterwards. You would have heard me talk with him about that in episode 8. And then I got back on trail. And then another shout out that I want to give at this point in time, because this happened just over this past weekend. I saw a picture on Instagram of Graybeard. And in the picture, I recognized a guy. And this guy goes by the name of Planner. And I met Planner in Glasgow, Virginia, and I just sent him a text saying, hey, is that you in the picture? And he absolutely was him. So he had a recent Graybeard encounter and said that Graybeard cooked him some pancakes, which was awesome. Planner is a section hiker. He is headed north. Again, I crossed paths with him in Glasgow last year, and he ended 2025 in Duncannon, Pennsylvania, picked up in Duncannon, and is aiming for Katahdin here in 2026. So quick shout out to Planner. And then the first update that I want to give will be about Goldilocks. Now, Goldilocks on this show, you would know her as Won't Get Up Will. And this relates to Graybeard as well, because it's Graybeard who renamed her. And I read an article on the Trek recently about that renaming and Goldilocks' trail name journey, which was a great article. And the update about Goldilocks is that she is starting a Sobo thru hike here in 2026 and starting it this week. Because of weather, she's not actually starting at Katahdin. She's starting at Monson and heading north to Katahdin, and then she'll flip back down to Monson and go south from there. But she is on trail now and has just gotten started. It was during her practice hikes that she ran into Graybeard and now is Goldilocks and no longer Won't Get Up Will. And she is a blogger for the Trek this year. So follow her. You would find her as Goldilocks Bellavance on the Trek. And I will be following along to see how she's doing on this 2026 thru hike. That'll be awesome to be able to read along. And then I've got a couple Slobo updates as well. The first one I'm going to give is that Foggy Froggy is back on trail. Foggy Froggy is going to thru hike the Long Trail. Now, we talked about the Long Trail a little bit a few episodes ago. And the Long Trail is one of the oldest long distance trails. It tracks north to south or south to north, depending which way you want to do it, the state of Vermont, from the Massachusetts border up to Canada. It coincides with the AT for about between a third and a half of it from the Massachusetts border up to about Killington before the AT veers off to Maine, and then the Long Trail continues up north. It's going to be about 270 miles in total, and Foggy Froggy is through hiking that. And as I'm giving this update, Silly Putty is on trail with her. So Silly Putty got a couple days off, and she has joined Foggy Froggy on trail. And it sounds like Margot Polo might also join Foggy Froggy at some point in time as well. And then there's Ratatouille. So last time I talked about Ratatouille in sort of real time, I mentioned he was on the Scotland Trail. He has now at this point in time finished up the Scotland Trail, finished the Scottish National Trail, bus trip through Ireland, and did the Lavengor Trail in Iceland. And I think as I talk to you, he is still in Iceland, but I also think that he is going to be stateside again, basically any day now. So those are my updates there. A lot of stuff that I was very excited to share, so I'm glad that I have the opportunity to do that. And the other thing that I'm going to do this next episode at this point. There have been a couple trail glossary entries from recent episodes that have just kind of been hanging out there without definition. So it'll be another callback to previous episodes when these came up. And maybe that's the perfect timing for these callbacks right before I'm going to play some reruns anyway. So you'll get to hear those things again soon. I'll just make sure that those are the episodes that I drop. And so, as I mentioned, I'm going to do that next episode. This episode, let's go ahead and jump into today's haiku. And as you'll hear further on in the episode, this day, June 17th, was a reunification with a lot of people that we had met prior on the hike at this point. And so I specifically wanted to pick a haiku that talks about unity and harmony. Here I think I've got a good one, and it's from May 4th, 2018. And this one has a title. They don't all have titles. In fact, most don't have titles. But sometimes I title the haikus, and being May 4th, the title is The Force. And here it goes. World in harmony, beauty of identity. As one, we are strong. June 17th, 2025. Out of the wilderness. Start, Stealth Campsite, Maine. End, Shaw's Hiker Hostel, Monson, Maine. Miles, 7.2. And with this entry, I'm going to start a new thing here where I kind of describe the picture a little bit. I'm looking a little bit ahead, and there's an entry that's coming that almost kind of depends on you having a little bit of that background. I'm also wondering if, even when that's not the case, like this one in particular is not going to be particularly crucial, but even so, that might be kind of a fun thing, especially to those of you who might click through, get sort of my take on the picture. So I'm looking at a picture of Haley and me, and honestly, my hat's kind of fallen off, kind of weird, goofy or whatever. We both look a little bit goofy in certain ways. Haley's just really close to the camera. Otherwise, she's always perfect at looking good in pictures. Me, I don't have that same skill, so I'm just goofy just because I'm goofy. But we are, and I don't know exactly where, but we're near the end of the wilderness in this picture, and there is a waterfall behind us. So it's actually a pretty cool picture, even though, like I said, the people in it might look a little bit funny. It's actually a great picture, and it's almost focused on the background with this waterfall coming in. So anyway, that's the picture for today. On to my reading of the entry here. We had been originally hoping to start the day at Lehman Brook Lean-To, which would have given us a short 3-mile hike to Maine Highway 15. As it was, our stealth site was 4.2 miles shy of that mark. It was a bit of consolation that Cameron, who walked into Birdman's just as we were leaving, a young guy who's relatively quick, said that he got to Lehman as planned, but that it was a push and he got in pretty late. Stealth camping was certainly the right move for us. We had called Shaw's from Barren Mountain, one of the peaks we summited on Sunday, setting up 2 nights, tonight and tomorrow. Shaw's is the hostel noted in Bryson's A Walk in the Woods as the most famous guest house on the AT. Once we got to Maine 15, all we had to do was give them a call and they would come get us. The driver, a guy named Cooper, was a high-energy guy who thru-hiked last year. He became the first to congratulate us on completing the 100. When we arrived at the hostel, we were greeted by a number of people we had met along the way, cheering for us as we got out of the vehicle. There was almost the whole Cooper Brook Falls group: David, Caveman, Justin, and Sunshine, and Chaps. Won't Get Up Will, who we met back in Millinocket and had been following on trail registers, as well as Daddy Longlegs, who we met at Herd Brook that first night in the wilderness, who had been hiking with Will for about 4 days. Taco and Jackson from East Branch are both here, as well as Cameron, who we met just yesterday. It's crazy to see so many people that we met along the way. And no real sign of Dan and Michaela, wondering what happened to them. Fernando was apparently here yesterday, as was Chia, who had mentioned that he might come back to Monson after finishing. As we checked in, we also met Poet, who runs the hostel. I asked him how he got his trail name, and it turns out it was because all of his register entries are haikus. I guess I'm not the first. Smiley face. Looking forward to a 0 here tomorrow. It seems most people take 2 0 days here. Depending if my legs, pretty sore right now, seem trail ready again, we may do the same. All right, we're going to take a quick break to hear from the sponsors who help keep Muse's AT podcast on the trail. These are offerings that truly enhanced my thru-hike experience, so I'd really like you to check them out. Please look for and follow the links in the show notes to this episode. Looking forward to that lazy day on the couch, knocking down your Netflix queue and wondering what to wear? Quick answer: wear something else. Summit Ready Apparel is clothing built for those who scramble over jagged rocks, reach the peaks, and actually enjoy getting caught in a torrential downpour. If you're someone who doesn't mind the elements and has the grit to crush the next segment anyway, look no further than Summit Ready to match your restless trail spirit. Check out the catalog at summitreadyapparel.com and get ready for your next adventure. That's summitreadyapparel.com. Looking for your next great trail read? Walk Uphill is a powerful story about leaving the emptiness of modern corporate life behind and finding a completely new beginning on the Appalachian Trail. It's about discovering what life can look like when you embrace freedom, lighten your load, and take it step by relentless step. I actually read this book myself during a couple rest days in Gorham, New Hampshire, right after conquering the brutal terrain of southern Maine. I literally couldn't put it down. I read it from cover to cover in 2 days. The book chronicles the real-life events of the author, Bounce the Hiker, in a twisty, shocking, edge-of-your-seat story that even the most imaginative fiction writer couldn't make up. Just a quick content warning, there is definitely adult material in this book, so I wouldn't recommend buying it for your 10-year-old's birthday. But if you're looking for a gripping, raw trail adventure, I highly recommend Walk Uphill by Bounce the Hiker. You can find it easily on Amazon by searching Walk Uphill Book, or just click the direct link in the show notes of this episode. All right, we have made it to Shaw's, which, if I'm being honest, is kind of hiker paradise. In this episode, I want to get into sort of kind of the basic layout of Shaw's and then also maybe a rundown of a lot of their amenities. Before I do that, I do have one last story from the 100-mile wilderness. The way I ended up kind of speeding things up at the end there, slid right past this. It's a funny little story. There's not really too much to it, but here it goes. My trekking poles, you might remember this from the gear show, but that was a while ago now, so I'll go ahead and throw the reminder out there anyway. They both telescoped and folded. And that was a really cool feature because, as I noted back in that episode, one of the things I really liked was that I could really fold up my trekking poles and get them on the side of my bag and just keep walking along without even really breaking stride. So very cool, very happy with those trekking poles. Of course, I'm a little behind on my post-trail tasks, so they are actually still sitting here broken, and I haven't gotten REI and tried to get that taken care of yet. But in any case, cool trekking poles. Haley and I got to Barren Mountain, and one feature of Barren Mountain was this Barren Mountain, I think they call it the Barren Mountain Slide, or Barren Slide. And it's like this rock scramble. So you're going to have to put trekking poles away and just go hands over feet over this thing, which was a lot of fun. This is another one of those fun moments where Haley and I were really enjoying it. I think we both had a lot of fun on this rock scramble, but I couldn't get the little button where I could then slide the telescoping part of my trekking pole. I could not get that to push in. At this point, Barren Mountain's roughly a day out from Monson. I had mentioned in the entry that I called the hostel from Barren Mountain to set up a stay that started on Tuesday. So anyway, I'm struggling with this thing for a little bit. I think probably on the mountaintop, because if I remember correctly, and I could be completely wrong on this, but if I remember correctly, the rock scramble was a little bit past the peak. So we're actually basically on the mountaintop and getting ready to go again after I've made this call to the hostel. And I'm trying to collapse my trekking poles so that I can do this rock scramble, and I just can't get this button. So I eventually give up on it, and Haley just rams it into my pack so that I end up doing this rock scramble with essentially like a lightning rod on me with my trekking pole just straight up in the air from my pack. So anyway, it made for a funny picture, and I'll make sure I share that picture on the Instagram. Ultimately, on Tuesday, the day that we're talking about, seated at the picnic table at Shaw's, I had no problem just working that button. I actually had to pull it out a little bit so that I could push the button in. Either way, seated at a picnic table, that's a little bit easier, and I just managed to do it all, and it was no problem for the rest of the hike. But so I just wanted to share that story about it, essentially, going through a rock scramble with an antenna on my back. Okay, so Shaw's. So first of all, we get to Maine Highway 15, to the trailhead there, and I don't think we waited very long at all. I think it was maybe a couple minutes or whatever, and my instructions from when I had called them from Barren Mountain were, just call us whenever you get to the trailhead, we'll come get you. So I do. I dial them up on my phone, I call them, say we're there. Waited a couple minutes, maybe 5 minutes, 10, it wasn't long. It wasn't very long at all. And the Shaw's Hiker Hostel van comes up, and this guy Cooper, he was awesome. He pulls up and just immediately, all right, congratulations, you made it through the wilderness. Yay, go for you. It was amazing. And I don't know if it had even occurred to Haley and I yet to kind of celebrate that as an accomplishment. I'm not sure. We were certainly happy, and I think we had, relief, and we had, like you even heard from her a couple weeks ago in that interview, it had worn on us and we were ready. And so now we had made it. So yeah, we felt a degree of that, but Cooper just kind of made it hit home in a certain way, right? Like, wow, we really should be absolutely exuberant right now, like he was. So that was awesome. We get in, it's just this excited ride back. It's not a very long ride. It's 5 minutes maybe. We get to the hostel, and he does our tour around the hostel as well. And it continues being this whole vibe, he was super excited for us. The other thing that was really cool before we even kind of got this tour, so right as we got out of the car, was at the main house where Haley and I would get checked in and stay. And this upstairs, it has a balcony. On the balcony are Daddy Longlegs and Won't Get Up Will, and they just cheer as soon as they see us. And then some of the others were around and stuff too, and they kind of took it up also. And it's like, this was just really cool. It was, I don't know, like running a race, like your cheering section at the finish line sort of thing. And that was a really awesome feeling. So then the other thing we did before we really got the tour of the place was we checked in. So we went straight into one of the main buildings on sort of the Shaw's campus, if you will, is Poet's Gear Emporium. That's where they have the register, and so that's where they also check all the hikers in and everything too. So I guess that's where I'll start talking about the layout. I've already talked a little bit about the main house, and we'll come back there, of course. But Poet's Gear Emporium, it's this huge gear shop on the first level, and it's got the register, and that's where we met Hippie Chick and also Trippy. And you heard Hippie Chick say that both Trippy and Cooper are returning this season, which is great. They were both really awesome and really enhanced the experience there at Shaw's. And they got us checked in and told us we were going to be in the main house on the second floor and all that, and that was great. Above the gear shop is also a resupply. So it's this 2-story building, and you've got a whole bunch of gear that they're selling on the first floor, and then a bunch of food on the second floor, which we'll get into it a little bit. One of the main things you need to do when you're in town is stock up on your food. And you probably heard me say this to Hippie Chick and Poet, but that was easily the best resupply on trail. Tons of stuff up there, and you could just tell that they very thoughtfully gone through the selection and put exactly up there what hikers are really going to want. And then the other thing, down in the area with the gear where we're checking in basically at the register, they also have a couple coolers. And as you arrive, they will hand you either a beer or a soda, whatever you prefer, water. And the first one's free. They're just welcoming you this way. It's kind of them, once again, joining in the celebration that you just got out of the wilderness and you've got something big to celebrate there. Next place we really see is the main house, because what we're invited to do there is drop our gear. So we pick out our bed, we drop our gear near the bed, and then we head out to the bathhouse. But first, about the main house itself. 2-story building. They've got a couple private rooms in there too. Haley and I weren't particularly interested in that. We wanted to be in the main bunkhouse with everybody else. Still very glad I did that. And so upstairs it also has, I don't know, they probably have 10 or 12 beds in this kind of one room. And that would be where we, for instance, and I actually think it was the next day, but that would be where we met Margot Polo, like you heard us talk about not long ago. Also, Won't Get Up Will was like the bed next to mine. This guy Hoot that you heard Wayfinder talk about, he was like the bed on the other side of me. Haley was like across the room. Chaps was like right next to her. So even just being in that upstairs area is kind of its own sort of community thing. Downstairs is a communal sort of lounge. They had couches. They had a bunch of DVDs that you could watch. We ended up watching movies quite a bit of the time. A couple guitars. Shaw's was one of the places I did pick up a guitar and kind of strummed it a little bit, and did that a lot of the time that I was there, actually. And it was actually during my stay that they instituted the honor fridge. So you would, on the honor system, grab some stuff out of this fridge, tell them at the end of your stay, hey, I grabbed this many things, and then they would charge you for it as appropriate. That was there in that sort of hiker lounge area. Our next stop was really the bathhouse, and this was kind of an ingenious setup as well, because the bathhouse had, of course, the showers and the facilities, the toilets, but it also had the laundry right there too, in basically the same room. So you could take all your grimy clothes off in the shower, and then as soon as you threw your loner clothes on, which, by the way, the loner clothes were right there in that same building as well. Like I said, they set it up really well. So you throw your loner clothes on and your laundry is just right there. Just toss it in the laundry and get that done. And then they had a couple of rooms above this as well. I think those were private rooms. I didn't even see them, but there was also a little lounging area adjacent to, or actually one of the rooms in the bathhouse adjacent to the whole laundry area and actual facilities and everything too. And I remember just chilling on that couch at least a time or two as well. That might have been like when I was updating my handwritten journal or something like that. There was also another bunkhouse nearby, And that would eventually be the bunkhouse that I would end up staying in Friday and Saturday night before I ultimately left Monson on Sunday. So I ended up being there for a while because we're only on Tuesday right now. That other bunkhouse, I think, had even more beds than the upstairs in the main house that I described. So a pretty cool community atmosphere in there as well. I want to say between the two, though, I definitely did prefer the upstairs in the main house. But yeah, either way, it was pretty nice accommodations. The other sort of main feature of the layout that is kind of significant to me anyway is the fire pit area and the yard. The yard is a decent sized yard, and it's actually in that yard that I tested out whether or not I could put my tent up successfully with my trekking poles instead of carrying my tent poles, and ultimately decided to send my tent poles home because that was successful. But this fire pit just has a bunch of chairs around it and everything, picnic tables nearby, just another area where people can just kind of chill out. And so the whole vibe of it really is just this whole, like, just come and relax and enjoy and celebrate the adventure you're on, but take a little bit of a rest from it at the same time. Some of the amenities at Shaw's. First, I've got to mention the breakfast. For a very reasonable price, you get a breakfast of eggs and bacon and potatoes and as many pancakes as you can eat. And it's fun. Everybody on the crew will just come out multiple times with the pancakes, and they'll keep coming as long as you're still sitting there. And this was funny even regarding the bacon, because I was talking to Poet and Hippie Chick at Trail Days, and I told them, I was actually a vegetarian, but I never told you guys that. My theory was give away bacon, make friends, because everything else in that breakfast worked perfectly fine for that. And that's what I did. And I generally did have appreciative people that, were like, oh, cool, I'll take your bacon. And then I mentioned the gear shop, and I mean, basically Poet's Gear Emporium. This is something, though, that in that gear shop, what you would do is you would sit down with Poet, well, whether it's in the gear shop or outside or whatever. But this was the thing that everybody looked forward to, is just sitting down with Poet and getting Poet's shakedown. Because he will take you through the backpack, going item by item, and really make you think about what are you going to use? What are you not going to use? And I didn't see a single person who didn't come away happy. Some people, like me, swapped out a couple things and just made themselves that much incrementally better. There are some people, though, that changed almost their entire setup, tent, backpack, whatever. And they were all the better for it, headed down trail. Because what Poet's going to do is just make sure you're the most comfortable, make sure that you're going to be able to have the most fun out there because you're carrying as light a load as possible and still have everything that you absolutely need. Another thing that they offer is shuttles, and I definitely took advantage of this myself, Haley and I shuttling up to Bangor for her to eventually take that flight home. But the shuttles can serve any number of other purposes as well, like you could be slack packing through the area. That could be how they support you through the 100-mile wilderness. They'll do a food drop in the wilderness, just like I did through the AT Hostel. And after talking to Hippie Chick and Poet over Trail Days, one of the things that I'm likely to do when I go back to Summit Katahdin is I'll probably use Shawls for that, just because they're awesome folks. AT Hostel is too, but, in any case, we had already talked about that now, so that's probably what I'll do. And that's probably where I'll go ahead and leave it today. In these coming days, we'll talk about what we're doing on these 0 days, how we're getting ready to get back on trail again, and then, of course, the pivot when Haley ends up deciding to go home and what that ends up looking like. So there could be plenty to talk about here in Monson. And then the other thing that I'm tracking is that I've got a few things I've been kind of stringing you guys along on, so I'll try to get those caught up before we leave Monson as well. So I look forward to talking more about Monson and our time at Shaw's. Until then, this has been Muse. Thank you for walking with me, and happy trails.